California Task Force, reparations for direct descendants of enslaved people only. There's a lot here. This headline here, if you are going to go down the route of reparations, and just to be clear, I am not for, well, I've kind of stayed out of that topic, but in general, I'm not for it. And I'll make a case for that as to why. But if you do go down that route, then I think it has to be only for direct descendants. And I will give California credit for tackling this issue head on. What most places are doing, including their federal government and other states, is they're just ignoring it. And for me, either you say I am not for it or I'm for it. I'm not for it, just like Nick Fuentes. Are you okay with Marjorie Taylor Greene speaking for Nick Fuentes? We'll get into that later with J.D. Vance. Can't wait to do that. Are you either okay with it or not? Don't hedge your bets. Don't hem or haw. If you are, explain it. So if you are against reparations, just articulate why. And the main point isn't for me to say my point on it, but I wanted to give California credit, even though I don't agree with it. They are addressing the issue. That's better than not addressing it. That's where our country has been left open for this critical theory, is because it's like a relationship and you had some type of hurt from the past and we haven't addressed it. Like, I don't know, maybe somebody cheated on somebody or something, and you keep on going like nothing happened. Now, it's not exactly the same, because these are, our ancestors, and this is hundreds of years ago plus, but it's similar in that way. So a year ago, June of 2021, California Reparations Committee confronts harms of slavery, debates direct payments. So they started a 2-year process here where they did this was a true focus group. The federal government's doing these fake focus groups that aren't really doing anything. So they just keep doing focus group after focus group. They've got this HR 40 bill and nothing comes of it. It polls terribly. So Democrats are not for reparations. If you were to talk to Nancy Pelosi and them in a room with no audio, nothing can leak out, they'd be like, hell, we're not for this thing. Have you seen the polling on it? But obviously they can't say that. So every 4 years, they get up on their podium at the primaries and say, we're for reparations. When's the last time you heard them even talk about it? I would respect if they said no, and here's why. So they did this and they talked about everything. They're like, hey, we're not just here to seek an answer, to say there was harm, but we want to determine the depth of the harm and all that. So that's when it started, and this is where we are now. So they had 6 hours of debate. This reparations task force that I believe started a year ago voted that only Black Californians who can prove a direct lineage to enslaved ancestors will be eligible for the statewide and first in the nation initiative to address the harms and enduring legacy of slavery. So if you are going to go down this route, I respect that. You would have to. Now here's how many people can prove that? It's probably not many people. So it will be interesting to see if people are hurt in California when they can't, or if they can't prove it, how that really works. Is it someone who's, I don't know, barely Black that can prove it or something? Are there going to be situations that actually make things worse because of this? So we have some comments in the chat. Let me take a break, read some comments on the reparations. Reparations are a fail, Casual Goat says. Stop focusing on the Black community and stop putting them down. Reparations could include dropping CRT in cities. These are the things that keep Black people down. Amen. And so I guess I'll digress for a second on my take in general on reparations before I jump back in here. Is I understand people's concerns. I don't want to make it sound like I don't understand the concerns for reparations. My last name is Scottish. I'm not, unless you're writing for Marvel, I'm not Scottish. I don't have Scottish ancestry in that manner. that came from slave ship, where and my ancestors would be called boy, and they would say you're the McSmith boy, and your name just handed down from there. So and that's through Jamaica though, and it makes sense Scottish because it was a British colony. So it's not through America's slavery. So I think I can speak on this, at least for my opinion. Is I understand the concern, but life is savage and life is not fair. Every group that had land taken from them and was enslaved that has ever happened in the face of the history of the world did not get reparations. You just look at America. Native Americans worked with people to enslave and to catch slaves, and are they supposed to pay reparations? Native Americans, and I'm just using them as an example because they were here, they were the Native Americans, that's why we call them that. They took land from each other all the time. They didn't give each other reparations after that land was took. What you got was a casket. So in a vacuum, would it make sense? Would it have made sense at the time? I know there was a promise that couldn't be fulfilled of the 40 acres and a mule in great land in the southeast coast. This is the land that is worth some of the prime real estate in our country that was promised. But it was a promise that wasn't able to be kept up. Life is savage. Life is not fair. It didn't happen at that time. And what that means is that just because it didn't happen at that time doesn't mean it happens now. And we have to live we are over a century plus removed from that. At what point are we going to live in the here and now? This is our country. We have power to make it what we want it to be. We have had plenty of time to get our generations in line to value what we need to value, to succeed, to have opportunity. I don't even care, even if you say it's a racist country and the opportunity is not equal, at least you have an opportunity. Do you want to be a Uyghur right now in China? There's always a worse situation. Do you want to be a child in Yemen? Do you want to be in Syria? Do you want to be oppressed in some of these other areas? There's always someone who has it worse. We have opportunity. We focus on that now and what we want the country to be now. Handing out money from the past, the only way that I would consider it, if I thought it would help race relations, it would help leftists, people who hate the flag or triggered by the American flag, to feel a little bit better about, even a little bit, I would say maybe it's worth it. None of that, in my opinion, is true. It wouldn't happen. So I think it's time to move on. I know it's tough because, I didn't agree with what Reagan did in, I think it was 88. Let me bring this up. I think I have it in here. The U.S. paid $20,000 in reparations for the Japanese American internment camp situation. Really dark moment, World War II. FDR issued Executive Order 9066 on February 19th, 1942. When you hear these dates in the 1940s, it's just like, obviously wasn't alive, but it's still triggering. 41, 42, 43. This order allowed for Japanese people to be placed in war relocation camps. And I thought, damn, how could we do that? How did that happen in America? Well, it's not that surprising now. We weren't that far away of it for the pandemic. And if it weren't for any laws or anything, I think half the country would like to do this with Trump supporters. Just my take. Maybe I'm paranoid or wrong. But that happened. And Reagan, let me search for it. I don't remember where it is. Let me see. Reagan, yeah. So in 88, President Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which provided $20,000 in reparations to the surviving detainees of Japanese American internment. I would not have opened that Pandora's box. I do not agree with it, because if you do it for that, that if you are a person who supported it for that, then you would have to support reparations. Or I don't know, help me understand if you're in the chat, if someone, not you in the chat, but just hypothetically, if somebody, it would apply if you agree with this, if you agree with Ronald Reagan in 88 signing the Civil Liberties Act, providing $20,000 in reparations to surviving detainees of the internment camps, then why would you not support reparations for slavery? Help me understand that. Same with any legislation for Native Americans as well. How could you support those and not support reparations for slavery? I don't understand the argument. Maybe there is one. I'm not, an expert in all this stuff. Maybe there's an argument I'm not seeing. Let me go back to the chat, see what people are saying about it. It is a topic that I think needs to be talked about more in our country. And we need to have honest conversation. I'm not for it. It's time to move on. Why are you living in the past not 200 years ago, but you're living in the past hundreds of years ago, like decades ago, 5-6 generations ago. You cannot be living in the past like that. And I don't think it's something that should make you hate this country. You are this country now. The founding fathers just set the blueprint for you to take over. That's all that happened. And you keep going back to, and I'm just saying a hypothetical people keep going back to the past to excuse their hate in the present. Let me see what the chat has to say about it. Josh Weiser says, if you really think about it, with reparations after slavery and Jim Crow was abolished, was when slaves were granted their freedom under the Constitution. Yeah. And life isn't fair. Like, I know that it was promised by, what was the general's name again that promised it? Oh, I forgot. Is it just escapes my name. I know that stuff very well. Sherman. So General Sherman promised it, but it was a promise he couldn't cash. He couldn't keep. And I think it was a fair promise. I have no problem with reparations at that time. I know it hurts reading back on the history, and it did lead to being behind the 8 ball, and it's still trickled now to today, but now we got to talk about how to get out of it. I'm not looking back at that as an excuse. So you could, even if you want reparations, don't come to me with reparations as an excuse for where we are now, whoever they are now. I'd be damned if I'm using that as an excuse for anything. Isaac Hull says, it seems like a good argument, reparations, but I don't think reparations will solve the problem. What problem are we solving? Thank you, Isaac. What problem are we solving with reparations? I know. I need to know the answer to that. People would say it's a debt dude. Cut the check. Life don't work like that. So I don't blame you for asking for it, but don't hold your breath, is what I would say. Especially when you hate the country. That's the part that really bothers me. Like, you pretty much hate the country. You spit on half the citizens on the country just because you don't agree with them politically. And then you say, cut the check. What the hell? Are you crazy? Nobody's cutting a check to you or being okay with that. Especially with that. If people wanted reparations, I think the best way would be to show what is good about the opportunity in the country now. I mean, nothing would go farther towards reparation than saying, if that's what you want, not that you would do these things for reparation, because that's not genuine, but defending J6 defendant and saying that's not constitutional, for example, and say, I might not agree with them politically, but I want to live up to this country's constitution. Things like that would go way further than cut the check. You say cut the check, I say shut the hell up. You sound stupid. Nobody's cutting you a check. Let me read Casual Goats. Did I read this one? There are so many things that could be done, and reparations are going to be a teeny Band-Aid that does nothing to solve the obvious issues that arose from Democrats putting blacks down decades ongoing. Absolutely. It is. And it's a deep issue, and I want to be sensitive to it, especially for Black Americans, because it's a issue that has been handed down generation by generation that people are unhappy with. And who knows? Is there a genetic piece to this too? Genetically, the hate and the hurt, which is understandable, handed down generation by generation, that might be. And I think Democrats have taken advantage of that by saying they're for something that they're really not for. When's the last time you heard them talk about it? They really don't, unless they have to. So I'll end it on that. Let me know what you think. California, they're still going forward. There's nothing in stone yet with this. It was I don't know if it was heated, but it was a close vote in California, the most progressive state probably. I know there's conservative pieces in it, but it will be interesting to see where this goes. While the scope of reparations will be determined in the coming months, many task force members say they expect cash payments to be one part of the proposal as well as a formal apology. The task force said this eligibility determination will help economists tasked with quantifying the amount of reparations owed. That's fair. As far as the apology goes, who's apologizing? I don't know why we need an apology. For who's apologizing for what? Nobody's alive that was a part of that. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's just more virtue signaling. Let me know what you think.